Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Mental Health Mondays. And before we get started, we just wanted to remind all of you guys that we are not medical professionals or mental health professionals. We're just some regular Joes who are trying to share our stories and the stories of people in our community with the hope of helping others not feel alone. If you are having any problems and you need help, please either dial 988 or seek immediate medical help as soon as possible. Okay? Please be well and remember that people love you in your life. Now, for today's topic, we are going to be delving into something very serious, but I feel is actually all of us here feel is under discussed within our society at large, and that is unfortunately unaliving. Now, hopefully, you guys understand what we mean by that. The YouTube overlords will not let us say the S word, but self unaliving. So today we have our guest with us today, Dennis, aka Sharp Guy ATX, and he wanted to share some stories with us that touched him personally. So, Dennis, have at it, my friend. Introduce yourself and tell us what you want to share, man.
Well, good morning, everybody. Dennis here, SharpguyATX. Most of you probably know me by. Been a part of the community here for a couple years now, and kind of found this through Big Red EDC, and interestingly enough, watching him tonight, Pocket Metal. I don't know why both of those guys kind of touched me when I was first started, researching and reviewing knives that I might purchase, but they did, and um, it's been amazing ever since. I mean, the community here has been awesome, and finding things
Oh,
like
yeah.
this that are so unexpected, it's just reiterates to me how great this community really is, because
Mhm.
there's a lot of things that I think we all have to share collectively that. Um, Specifically, mental health Mondays. I mean, we have so much to share. And I think looking back now, the four experiences that I've had um, with people who've had, the last mental break, which is how I'll refer to it. Um, it I don't even have words for some of it, but
Mm.
it touched me, and I think the reason that it did is so that I could kind of, give back and share some of the things that have happened so that, maybe it helps somebody else down the road or tomorrow or today or right now. But, you know, um, I'll start out with the first one. Most of the time growing up, like I was telling the guys before we started, my class graduated in '85, and it wasn't really something that was, going around in school. I mean, you didn't hear
Mhm.
about it much. And even on the military side, being a military brat, didn't hear about it much there either. Um, the first brush I had, I had left California, dropped out of college, and took a job at a beef processing plant as a manager trainee out in Iowa.
Mm.
And a couple months after I got there, I met a gal, a little bit older. She was in her mid 30s. I was 21 ish. Um, she had some kids, um, and we ended up hitting it off. It was pretty cool. She wasn't originally from there. She was a very charming woman from Georgia with the drawl and all that, So
Oh,
I was
yeah.
kind of like smitten with her quite a bit. Well, after a couple months, we moved up in together, and a couple of days after we moved in together, she said that the kids needed to be dropped off at her ex's place, which was the dad of her youngest, and they needed to be dropped off there for the next month until the end of the school year so that they could finish school at the school that they were going to instead of changing them because why do that to the kids? It's not their fault that their mom and dad weren't getting along, whatever. So I was like, cool. So um, we got up at like 5:30 in the morning to drive the kids over and drop them off at his trailer. And The only thing I was really told, was they, amicably split. She had her place in town and everything was going great and dropping the kids off on mutual agreement. So the very first morning we go over there to drop off, his truck's in the driveway and he's not supposed to be there. He's supposed to already be on his way to work. And ironically, we both worked at the same place, the beef packing plant.
Mm-hmm.
He was a big wig manager and I was a starting out manager. Didn't know each other, but the kids went in the house, and then I had my window cracked, and he yelled out, and he was like, called out her name and said, "Can I talk to you?" And she was like, "Yeah, whatever, I'll go talk to him." So she gets out and goes, and I hear a little bit of the conversation, and she's like, "Nope, it's over." So she just starts turning around and walking back towards the car, and I'm watching this whole thing in the rearview mirror, and this guy reaches into the bed of the truck and pulled out a weapon, pew pew, and I yelled pew pew, and she kind of went, and he turned it around on himself, and
Oh, damn.
boom, and I was just like, oh my god, So immediately you go into shock. Um,
Yeah.
the next thing I did was turn around and look back at the house, and I see all three of the kids in the window.
Oh,
So
no.
I immediately went into rescue mode.
Yeah.
So I got out, made sure she was okay, which she was, and got over to where he was. I chucked the gun, the pew pew, and he was nothing. So I'd
Mm.
CPR'd, and I CPR'd my butt off. Well, a phone call was made, and we were out in the country. I mean, it was a good 15 minutes for the volunteer fire department to get their ambulance out
Oh,
there.
man.
So somehow or another, we got this guy going again, and
Oh, wow.
it it was crazy. I mean, after it, I mean, when they showed up, I mean, it was literally grabbed him by his shirt collar and his pant cuffs and threw him in a basket and threw him in the back of the thing because they knew, the kind of damage that happens when something like this occurs. So, it was like, okay, well, I didn't really hear anything, or we didn't hear anything from the cops or anything like that until the next day when the family turned off the switch on him. Well,
Oh,
then the police have to do an investigation. So this is where this one really kind of takes a turn. Um, I was kind of struggling with the fact that I kind of felt like maybe I got led into something, and I was a little bit, angry, and still in shock, about
yeah.
everything, that had happened. It was like, so I went in, and I was called in by the detective, and he wanted me to come in and, give a statement. And
Mm.
it was so imprinted in my brain. I go in and I give this statement, and I mean, the guy's ready to give me a trophy for giving like the best statement he's ever gotten in his 15-year career, whatever, blah blah. And we're finishing up, and he's like, "I know we don't have a lot to offer you as far as like victim support, like a lot of big cities do." He's like, "But let me share this with you. Um, there were four more. There were, yeah, four more cartridges in his pocket." And the detective believed that I was the only reason that it wasn't more people who
Oh, wow.
were injured or wounded or hurt that day. And simply because I was there, it changed what happened. And he said that is the
Oof.
only explanation he could have for why that would have been the way it was. And I was just kind of like, wow, okay. So in a way, the way I dealt with that was is I was put there for a reason. And prior to
Yeah.
that, I was struggling with it. And the other thing that I can speak to on this particular situation is there were a couple of guys around that I was good friends with through work, um, and they were Vietnam vets, and they had
Mm.
dealt with um, that kind of thing before. Seeing people, whether it was by their own hands or by the hands of somebody else, it's still traumatic.
Yeah.
And having them help work through the shock part of it was amazing. And that was one of the first times that I can recall where I had fellowship of people, who made me feel part of the community, and where I was like, oh, I got people, you know. But
Yeah.
as a young person, until that point, I didn't really have anything like that. But it really did kind of change things up, and our relationship didn't last beyond that. But I felt like when it was all said and done, I did the right thing, and I don't know that I wasn't, you know, not put there in that situation. And if
Yeah.
it wasn't by some divine intervention that I wasn't was put there, um, I'm at least glad I was, for the sake of those kids. I
Yeah,
mean, because
these
they were
these
Right?
kids.
ages 8 through 14, so then
Jeez.
they had to deal with that as well. But,
Yeah.
the one thing I will say is the community did have some outreach for the kids to help them deal with it.
Good.
Not so much for the
Good.
adults though. And that's something that's really interesting because nowadays there's a lot more support
Hmm.
Yeah.
out there than there ever was, at that point.
I think that started to take a turn around the 2000s, but in the 80s and 90s and even before, as an adult, you're just meant to suck it up and just deal with it, you
Yes.
know.
Yeah,
And how do you deal with
yeah.
that? Like, really?
Well, and here's the thing, and just to show how your mind shuts down after something like that. So an hour and a half after that, I went into work, and I
Hmm.
was actually sitting in the locker room putting on all of my gear to go out there and work on the floor of the hog butchery. I mean, and the funny thing is there was probably no other job that I could have had or told you about in my entire career or life thus far where you could have walked into some place bloody and nobody would give a darn or even notice anything because you're going to
Right.
work at a hog factory. I mean, everybody's bloody, So, but then it dawned on me as I was sitting there on the bench getting ready to, don all of my equipment. Dude, you got no business being here. What are you doing? You're covered in somebody else's blood, and you didn't even have the sense to. So the shock, that
Yeah.
happens. If you don't have somebody there to grab you back by the collar and say, "Dude, come sit down,"
Yep.
you need to take a break.
You went on autopilot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I did. I went home and put the chill on. At the time I wasn't really a big drinker or anything, so it really was
Mm.
just dealing with it. And then once my buds got off work, and I was able to kind of share and pick their brains, the healing of that particular event, at least as far as me, started. You know,
Mm.
and so and just one of those, don't know how you end up there, but just kind of like my life, I'm still all over the place. I live life to the fullest. I have no regrets. If I die tomorrow, I can tell you I've lived a much fuller life than 95% of the people that I know.
I have no
But
doubts.
it comes with some of this stuff too. It's not
Yeah.
all happy and roses and um, so I don't deal with anything related, until 2008. Um,
Mm.
I was living in Carmel, Indiana, up there by O'Brien there, Blue Creek Knives. And
Hmm.
I'd been up there for about 14 years. And I got a phone call from my mom that said that they couldn't find my dad and he was missing.
Oh no.
Well, he had just gotten back from Iraq and he'd been over there working for Halliburton, and they kicked
Hmm.
him out because he had diabetes issues that he was
Ah,
kind of keeping secret. But he had a good run. He'd been over there for like 7 or 8 years, and
wow.
had been back in Austin. And I didn't quite get the phone call from my mom. It was kind of one of those that's just kind of weird. There's more to be told, but we're not going to tell you right now, kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And less than 24 hours, just a little less than 24 hours after I got that phone call, I got a second phone call, and I don't know why, but I was expecting it. And mom says they found Pops in a hotel and he OD'd. And I'm like, well, this is just, just one of those where just like your brain shuts down, your body shuts down, everything shuts down.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, I don't have all the information. I don't know. So that creates just all this insanity going on. And I mean, that was,
Yep.
something just, and then being like 1,100 miles away from where my mom's at and where my brothers and sisters are,
Yeah.
then there's the feeling of helplessness. Um, so come to find out, he committed a crime of opportunity that he was pretty much going to go to jail for. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess between the shame and the fact that he knew he would be convicted, I'm guessing, I mean, we don't have any notes or anything like that, but under the circumstances. And the other thing that happens is, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, but if you have that ultimate mental break as a case is proceeding, the case stops,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no way to prosecute somebody who's not here. So it
Yeah.
was like, what the heck, you know? And it became super crushing. And my wife and kids and I drove down from Indiana, and the whole time we were like making all of the arrangements. And it didn't really hit me. I mean, I was in total shock by the whole thing. And
Mm-hmm.
it didn't hit me until I got back to Austin, and realized that even then, part of the family knew one thing and the other part of the family knew something completely different. And I
Mm-hmm.
found out over the next couple of days as we led up to the, memorial and everything, that that's a dangerous way to go too, because eventually those two worlds are going to collide, especially, while all this
Yeah.
stuff is going on and the emotions are up. And but I still think that there are some members of my family who have no idea um, what or anything occurred other
Yeah.
than he died. Um, but we all knew, and it's just kind of one of those. I don't know why, but I kind of in my mind was like, I don't know. I mean, I don't think I've ever put myself in those situations where I'd be having to make a decision like that, but I kind of
Yeah.
understood it. I kind of understood it. And I was like, does that mean I'm defective? Because I understood why somebody did something like that to themselves? Or is it just my brain trying to, help me deal with it so that I can start figuring out how to, move forward and heal? I had to be the strong one. I became the number one, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I became the patriarch of the family that day. And up until the actual funeral, after I got done speaking, I held it together pretty good. And then after that, it was like, okay, now it's my time. And,
Yeah.
you know, probably the hardest thing for me is going down to San Antonio and having the full honors, knowing that
Mm.
there's just so many unanswered questions. And especially as an oldest son, I'm burying my hero, who had been my hero for all these years. And then is it okay that that person's still my hero? So I mean, that one was just like really was just out of nowhere. And
Yeah.
um, you wonder about how things affect. I mean, to this day, um, and I know probably shouldn't be going to Jack in the Box, but I like their tacos. Um, but I mean, the Jack in the Box that I go to is right next to the hotel where they found my
Mm.
dad.
Oh
You know,
wow.
but it's kind of one of those where it's like that hotel's not going to go away. That
Yeah.
hotel's going to be there. I mean, until it's not. But um, there's still a reminder. Every time I headed to
Mm-hmm.
the airport and drove past that area, there's that constant reminder.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and that one, I saw it affect people differently. I saw people who reached out and did counseling. I saw people who um, had just ultimate mental breaks of their own, that
Yeah.
almost ended the same way. People who were involved with the whole situation. So
Hmm.
it is just kind of one of those where it's just like, just you see the ripple effect of how
Yeah.
it affects, the family, the friends, your entire community right there. And even though I didn't live in Austin at the time and hadn't for quite a while, um, their group of friends and their church friends and their work friends and
Hmm.
then family and all the extended. I mean, it was just insane, to see how many people that one person's action affected, you
Yeah.
know, and just crazy. Um, that still to this day is one of the reasons why I started going to counseling. Is finally
Hmm.
because after the second such kind of incidents, I'm just like, wow, yeah, I need some better understanding of this. And
Hmm.
around that time is around the same time that my kid's mom, um, she had she had a gastric bypass surgery.
Hmm.
And back in the day, you know, um, when they first started doing this procedure, they had nothing, no data or anything. So taking your stomach down to the size of a walnut um, definitely affects how you drink. And she
Hmm.
didn't really start going at it till a couple of years later. Um, and she'd got down to the goal weights and everything and had some adjustments done and all kinds of stuff, man. I mean, and but when she started drinking again recreationally, what she never did before, um, a 6 ounce glass of wine, if you think about it, only an ounce of that can go through the stomach.
Yeah.
So the other 5 ounces goes directly into the system.
Yep.
So it becomes a situation where, and it ended up being a big story on Oprah of all things, that they talked about, that all these PTA moms were getting arrested for DUIs and stuff, picking up their kids at school drunk. And well, nobody had any idea why. Well, it's because this all was so new. Well, this created a monster. And as we moved from Indiana back to Texas, where my mom was at, and actually my kid's mom, her mom and little brother still live there. So we all
Hmm.
had, we had all kinds of family in Austin. So moving back was kind of a no-brainer for us. And I thought maybe getting her away from the wild child that she was starting to become, might be a good thing for everybody.
Yeah.
And initially it was.
Hmm.
um, as we get settled and start making a new life for ourselves in Texas, in Austin, um, my uncle from South Dakota, the main reason that I'm a motorcycle guy, because my mom shipped me out to Sturgis, South Dakota when I was 15. My uncle didn't have any sons, he only had daughters. And they thought it would be good for me to get out into the woods and hang out. And little did they know, they'd introduce me to motorcycles and bikes, girls dancing on
And
top of beer
Sturgis of all
trucks.
places, right?
That man, um, probably about 2010, 2011, my uncle was battling debilitating pain from
Mhm.
having arthritis and having his bones break down. And he was just in
Oh,
really, really bad shape. And he
yeah.
was always a very hardworking guy. I mean, one of those guys that even in his retirement, he'd find a way to work 40 hours a week. One of those guys. Full respect, but besides that time when I was 15, I only saw the guy again a couple of times. But
Mm.
around 2011, the opioids started getting to him, and he didn't like not having control.
Oh.
So he made a decision, and they actually had retired down to Arizona, and he just walked out into the desert with his pew, and basically, couldn't deal with it anymore. For just
Yeah.
it was just too much pain. And this is a guy who had a huge influence on me, and
Mhm.
once again, kind of like the deal with my dad. I don't know that I agree with any of it. I know there was bad aspects of it, but I at least got it. I understood it,
Yeah.
and it was sad, but at the same time, I saw him when he was in pain, and I saw him before they got him on all the, opioids, and I mean, he was miserable. He was,
Yeah.
couldn't even move, and he was only in his, early 60s. So it was one of those. It's like, man, again, you know, but there's actually places now that I don't know. Is it okay for somebody who's hurting that bad, who's never going to get better, who's now being forced to be on debilitating drugs? Is that different than somebody who
Yeah.
needs help and nobody was there to help them or they didn't ask for help? In my mind, I'm kind of going, okay, this once again, it touches me. It touches my family. That was my mom's brother, and
Hmm.
it's one of those where it's just like you see the ripple effect once again. So fast forward about 4 years, 5 years. So my kid's mom is in full blown alcoholic mode. CPS is involved. Um, the only way she's allowed to see the kids is supervised visits. She's showing up to supervised visits hammered. Um,
Oof.
so it got to the point where I had to go for full custody of both of my kids because there was just no. I didn't go after money. I didn't. It wasn't like that. We were fine, but it was about protecting the kids. I'd probably rescued my daughter from her mom picking her up drunk over 20 times, um, and it takes a toll on you, and it starts really messing with you. And over that time,
Yeah.
I married my third wife, and if you were to look at everything from the outside, you would think everything was as good as it could possibly be. I mean,
Yeah.
we were in an upper middle class, very, very good school district, great neighborhoods. Um, I had a Camaro, I had a big old 4-wheel drive pickup truck that pulled our trailer around full of toys. And everything that you could imagine or want. The kids had everything they could imagine or want. From the outside, everything looks hunky dory, but I have a current wife who I live with, and then the ex wife moved a mile away from us and is creating chaos. So you can imagine,
Hmm.
it's really difficult to enjoy all the fruits of your labor when there's just chaos and insanity going all around you, and
Yeah.
lawyers are involved. So, um, CPS, um, they basically told me that in order for them to be able to help me, they would have to make me as bad in the eyes of the judge as they're making her look. And that's the only way they can help. It's for both of us to be bad parents. Otherwise, you're on your own and you need to go take care of this yourself. But they couldn't have just told me this in the beginning. They made me jump through all the hoops for 14 months to get to this point. So at that point, we just like, boom, grabbed the best possible lawyer we could. But
Yeah.
then, you got kids, you don't want to take them away from their moms. So you got to kind of handle all this stuff. And then if you handle it a certain way, I found out later, wife number three starts to think that you still have some affinity for wife number two,
Hmm.
and then I'm in the middle of some hoo ha, and all I'm trying to do is the right thing by my kids.
Yeah.
And as this is all progressing, wife number three develops a very, very heavy addiction to some dextroamphetamines and then goes up every day and then needs 15, 16 beers to come down every night. And I'm talking about a vicious cycle that over 18 months sucked me in.
Hmm.
And then I started drinking, and I'd never been a drinker at all. And I was drinking, I don't know, going through a handle every couple days. So I was just,
Oh wow.
this recipe for disaster and chaos. Well, in the meantime, we got the kids going to great schools. They're all super smart. They're all doing great. So I'm looking at everything and kind of going, okay, is it just me? You know, well,
Yeah.
um, the insanity, it just, we, I started realizing, we couldn't keep going. The kids had just seen their mom go through it. Now I was kind of getting sucked into it, but I was aware of it. I was
Mm-hmm.
aware of it. And it was just crushing me. I mean, their mom was getting picked up and thrown in jail. Their stepmom was just so out of her mind sometimes on the dextro that she would just like lecture at them for extended periods of time, which freaked the kids out, as you can
Mm-hmm.
imagine. you know um, but there was just so much going on, and I'm still in protection mode trying to figure out, okay, am I doing the right thing? What's going on here? Well, in the meantime, my oldest boy decides that at 17 he's going to move in with his girlfriend's parents and his girlfriend. And I mean, I'm just like, man, at first I was, after all this, it's worked so hard to get you where we are, and then you're going to trade me in. And don't get me wrong, they were loaded. I mean, they had a huge house. It was amazing. If I could have moved in, I would have too. But I consulted with a sheriff, and he asked me some questions. Really made me look inward, and reflect. And he was like, "Well, when did you move out?" And man, that's kind of hard because I moved out when I was 15. I got my GED when I was 16. So I
Mm-hmm.
mean, but I thought that's a different time. And this kid's like super, super successful. He didn't have to get a GED. I mean, he was graduating high school early with like already a year and a half of credits for college. I mean, he was brilliant.
Yeah.
So he asked me that, and then he was like, "Well, he's like, we can make him come home, but we can't make him stay there. And if he's doing as good as you say he is, you got to really think about this. I mean, he's varsity football, he's state champ football, he's
Mm-hmm.
graduating early, he's going to college, the whole. So, I mean, it really did make me look at it, but I was really feeling low after that. I mean, it was just kind of like, man, you know, my kid ditched me after everything
Mm-hmm.
I did, and it does settle in, you get a little. And then I started coming off the alcohol, and I mean, I realized that I was just hitting it way too hard. And, I smoker, most of my young life, not necessarily a big drinker. So for me to get this deep into it, I mean, it was starting to take a toll on me. And I split from wife number three, and got my own place. Me and my daughter were a couple miles away. I wanted her to be able to finish school where she started high school. I didn't get to do that. And after a couple months, me and wife number three decided to give it another go. And after a couple months, it wasn't working. And I just started feeling like, man, I'm getting ready to turn 50 years old. Haven't been able to stay in a freaking marriage to save my life, you know, and I mean, just I was in just a terrible frame of mind. And then with the alcohol withdrawals on top of that, the depression was setting in, and I didn't see it enough to go get help immediately. Um, this is where it gets kind of, oh man. So I didn't have anyone that I trusted enough to let them know that I had questions because I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
thinking about leaving, taking myself out, but the thought of that, taking myself out, wouldn't go out of my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew because it wouldn't go out of my head that meant I was in danger. So
Mm-hmm.
I figured out that I needed to seek some help. And I really didn't have anybody, that I felt comfortable enough to ask. So I ended up on my insurance, on the telephone with my insurance company, my health
Mm-hmm.
insurance company, trying to find someplace local. And they put me in touch with an inpatient spot. And I got on the phone with them. And I'll never be able to tell you why. I had a $25,000 deck with $30,000 worth of freaking landscaping that had just been freshly done in the backyard. But I'm sitting on the front porch. I'm sitting on the front porch talking to the insurance company. And then I hear the most insane blood curdling scream. I mean, just, if you're a parent, it's like someone's hurt.
Yeah.
Four houses down, 4 houses down from where I'm sitting, a little girl, elementary school age, comes running out the front door, almost goes through it, and crumples to the ground in the front yard. Followed 5 seconds later by her father, who I knew a little just because of church. I knew that he went to our church. And from where I sat on the porch, I was the only person who heard that they had just found her older sister, who was 18 years old, upstairs in her bedroom, who had took herself out.
Oh, Jesus.
And this little girl and this dad were just like, I mean, dude, they were just crushed. I mean, there was just, I mean, you
Yeah.
just saw when she came out that door and just, I mean, she had nothing. I mean, it was just the body just crumpled. And then to see the
Hmm.
support, that came over the next 15, 20 hours, and the whole community reached and grabbed around them and lifted them all up. That's amazing. But in that moment, I was like, how, once again, am I in a
Mm.
situation like this if there isn't some divine intervention happening here? But then I kind of started getting scared because I was like, no, this couldn't happen for me, to make me not, you know. So I just completely was like, all of a sudden, I was like, well, that's the answer for me, is that I could never do this. Even though that
Hmm.
thought had been there, I could never do this because I could never do that to my kids.
Yeah.
But I was still confused and I still checked myself in
Good for you.
2 days. Now, here's where it kind of gets, depends on your state, depends on your situation. This is just me. So I just want to make that clear to everybody. I was a business owner at the time. I had a couple people who depended on me. Um, my kids, they were old enough to kind of take care of themselves for a day or two, but my daughter went and stayed with her mom. She was doing all right at the time. Um, but after 2 days, I figured out that this particular place wasn't for me because what I needed was somebody to talk to
Hmm.
about this issue and this situation and how I was feeling. They stuck me into a environment where I was like a part of a group and I didn't even talk to anybody for like 48 hours. And once we got
Hmm.
to that 48-hour point and I realized that they were kind of looking more long term than I was, I realized that because I checked myself in, that gave me a lot more leeway, at least in the state of Texas, to also check myself out.
Yeah,
And
you
as
were
long as I
voluntary.
don't pose a danger to myself, then they have to let me go.
Right.
So
Right.
that was cool. I did get through a time where, I had questions, and the questions scared the living crap out of me to the point where I did feel like that was a good place. So one of the things that I definitely want to share is there's no shame in that, man. I mean, if you don't have,
Absolutely.
somebody to help you out, do whatever you have to do to protect yourself,
Yep.
and in this particular case, I don't know that, you know, I probably would have been fine, but I wanted to make sure I was fine. And I
Hmm.
was smart enough and coherent enough to recognize that. But, somebody asked me, they told me that I should write a book, of all the experiences, because there's a lot of great ones too. I mean, I've got some amazing stories to share, uh, but writing a book, and I thought about it. The name of my book, the thing that changed me, um, the thing that kind of just gave me clarity, was that. girl 4 doors down. And that's
Yeah.
what I would call my book. It's 4 doors down. Um, kind of a riff on the band too. I don't know. But
Yeah.
um, I haven't had such a rosy life since then. Um, Perfect example. My son graduated high school 6 years ago. He's got married and he has a kid, and I haven't seen him since he graduated high school.
Oh.
But he moved out, like I said, when he was 17.
Yeah.
And one of the most valuable tools that I learned over this stretch of time was is that you can get sucked into a lot of stuff, by allowing yourself to stagnate in a certain place, especially a very toxic place. So
Yeah.
one of the most valuable tools I learned to help my mental health has been give yourself 5 minutes. When there's something that happened to you that's out of your control, that you have no control over whatsoever after that, give yourself 5 minutes. Go jump up and down, cuss, slam your fist on, punch a hole in the door. I don't care. Do whatever you got to do, but give it 5 minutes. But then you're done, because there's nothing
Hmm.
positive that's going to come out of putting more time into it. It just makes it fester and become something a lot of times
Exactly.
bigger than it ever was, because you just allow it to go. So one of the
Hmm.
best tools that I've learned, because like I said, not every day's been great, but I found a great counselor. It wasn't a psychiatrist. I talked to one. It
Hmm.
wasn't a psychologist. It was actually a certified counselor, family counselor, um, who helped me, and it was mostly somebody I connected with. And
Yeah.
that's also really important, is finding that person you can talk to. And this community has a lot of those people. I mean, I haven't done it with a lot of people, but a couple times I got caught up in some conversations in the Discord, and jumped off the Discord, that ended up being awesome. You meet somebody, you
Yeah.
get to know somebody, and it also kind of gives you some insight that, yeah, you're not the only one going through the struggles of life. You're not the only one
Oh, yeah.
having the amazing fruits of life that
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah.
um, I kind of started getting lonely. And one of the most amazing things that happened when I found Big Red was is I found somebody who was as generous as I was. And that was
Mm.
one of the first things. But going to school, I had to tighten up the belt and everything. And I didn't want my generosity to wane. So I'm not sure where it goes from here, but once we, get this out there and start opening up the conversation, because there's more people. It's not just me. We were talking about this earlier. I
Oh, yeah.
mean, there's a lot of people who have been touched by these kinds of tragedies, and if we get together on it, and share, we come to the realization that maybe I'm not as unique or peculiar or weird or whatever it is that you're feeling, at that particular time. Um,
Yeah.
you know, we can start lifting each other up a little bit more, and not having to deal with the dread of who do I call, because
Hmm.
I can tell you that
I
might have
like
been
that.
what scared me the most, was when I realized that I didn't have anyone I could trust, that I could call,
Hmm.
and we have an opportunity to be that and do that for each other. And even though I might not be able to donate to every good cause that comes along, I can help put these kinds of messages out there. I can answer that text message or pick up that phone when necessary, and
Hmm.
just be there for somebody, even if it's not to the most severe point. And that's another part of it, is you don't have to let it get to that point before you go talk to somebody, you know
Yeah, that's true.
so
You don't
And
want it
I'd
to get
love,
to that point.
yeah. And let me interject something too. You may have people, let's say, in your life that you may trust with talking about this stuff, but you may be afraid to approach them because you're afraid of burdening them, and you shouldn't also allow that to stop you. That was my scenario even a few years ago when my last business started to crumble, and like my partner went bankrupt overnight, like literally in the span of a week. all of a sudden the negative thoughts started coming in, and oh, you're not going to amount to anything, you're a piece of crap, blah 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 blah, and I had friends to talk to, people that I could trust, but I didn't want to burden them because they had their own lives, and I didn't want to add to them, and that shouldn't. Don't let that stuff stop you, people. Like, if you need help, go ask for it, reach out to somebody.
Yes.
Well, and one of the things I will say, having kids just graduating college, and then also interacting with people from all the generations, that are parts of the knife community, I can tell you this. One thing is the youth, and it's because they've had to be, I guess, which is kind of sad in of itself, but the youth is better prepared because they've had to deal with more of it as a reality. Like you said, when you were in high
Yeah.
school, it was actually something that was a thing. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, it
when
was.
I was, like I said, when I was in high school, it was not. I mean, there was no guns, no pew pews, there was no knives, there was no. I mean, people would like
Hmm.
fight each other, after school out behind the gym.
And
Yeah.
we didn't graduate that far apart from each other. You graduated 85. I graduated 99. But by
Yeah,
the time that I went through, man, I had at least three friends attempt, some form of forever sleep, either by pills or by, knives or something else, and it was normal, man. I almost gave myself what's it called when you burn a hole in your stomach?
ulcer.
Ulcer. Yeah.
I almost gave myself an ulcer out of concern for my friends, because I it was just on my mind constantly.
Yeah,
How do I help these people? How do I save them? And at the same time, I was going through those same thoughts myself of
yeah,
like, oh, I didn't get into the school that I wanted, so I'm going to amount to nothing because I had like immense pressure on myself. So it's like,
Yeah.
like by my generation, it was a normal part of the conversation.
yeah,
you
That's
know?
that's kind of what's driving it to be worse is social pressure. You're seeing
Yeah.
suicides start hitting a very younger age.
Oh
Now
yeah.
there's 10 and 11-year-olds, sometimes even younger,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
especially like in the age of social media. They get bullied online,
Hmm.
and so they have
I
no
mean,
one to
there's no
talk to.
context. Exactly. Mom and dad won't get it,
They just say, "Oh, it's just, they're just bullies. Just ignore what
Yeah.
they say."
Yeah. Yeah.
We grew up with like sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt me. They
Yeah.
do. I mean, to
No, they
these,
they hurt.
some people are so impressionable. They're just teetering on the edge,
yeah.
Yeah.
and you
Well, I
have
mean,
no idea.
perfect example. If you look around, like in my family specifically, my brother and I, throughout our youth, moving around every 18 months max, going to a different
Hmm.
school, my brother and I became very easily adaptive. I mean, we could jump
Yeah.
into any situation, and it helped us later in life.
Yeah.
But my sister, it just destroyed her every time we had to move because she had to uproot and make new
Hmm.
friends. And I mean, so, it's interesting seeing how things affect two different people, or different ways,
Yeah.
and for some people, things like that are, you know, and in the end, I mean, that was one of the reasons why I moved out when I was 15, is because I got tired of moving.
Hmm.
And the girl I lost my virginity to was in California, and my parents were moving to Washington. So I was like, oh no, no, I am staying
Yeah.
here.
I just got a good thing going. You're not taking it away from me.
And you can look it up. Fallbrook's not a bad place to spend your last couple of years of high school. Really nice place, actually.
No, it's like at least my hope with all of this is like kind of like what you were saying is I I really want people to realize that this is part of life, for better or worse, unfortunately. Either you yourself will experience this kind of thought process, self-questioning, self-doubt, and you need to learn to have the tools to how to power through it, answer those questions, be like like assure yourself as time goes on that no, this isn't an acceptable route for me, you know. Or you're going to experience it vis-a-vis somebody in your life or somebody that you're connected to in some sort of way. And it's unfortunately part of the way the world is, but we need to either learn how to ask for support ourselves or be able to give support to others,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah. Kind of my motto. I mean, seriously. I mean, if you find a way to give back,
mhm,
sometimes that's the best thing that you can do. You
yeah,
know, I mean, be the person be the person that you didn't have there when you needed someone to be there. By becoming
exactly.
that person, that's the best solution for me, is becoming
Hmm.
that person. So that's really a big part of the reason that I came on today.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And if
And
any of
that's
you
a great
guys,
message.
if any guys listening, you got tools here, you know, chat
Hmm.
with any of us or people in the comments, anyone in the community.
Yeah.
I've received many messages, and this particular topic is a hot topic.
Hmm.
So I mean, it's even for me, I get these thoughts constantly, every day, all day long, and this
Hmm.
community helps me get through it.
And I
So
know
Yeah.
Sharif will agree with me. There's no bigger tool that I know than Maddie.
no,
He's definitely a tall one.
but I know a lot of people out there. They feel helpless and hopeless and lonely.
Yeah.
Those are like the big three. And just
Uh,
know, you're not lonely here.
Yeah.
Anyone who
no.
may be listening, everyone here's
It's
got an ear or a keyboard, and
it's easy to get trapped into that kind of thinking.
it
Like,
is.
I'll share a personal anecdote, right? Like, as I mentioned earlier, my last business, my partner went out of business. It crushed mine, and in the span of 6 months, I remember I was partaking of the leafy greens, let's say, quite a bit. That increased, of course, because that was my form of drinking. And there were times, that I would get into such a depressive state because that's what they don't tell you about the leafy greens, that it can also put you into that state. And I would literally sit on the floor with my dog crying, because I had nobody to talk to. I went from having a six-figure income to zero, literally in the span of a week. No future prospect. I had minimal savings that I was burning through at a high rate of speed because I was living in downtown LA, and like my apartment cost 1750 a month, all of this stuff. Like it was just the walls were closing in really quickly. I had just lost my mom, a few years earlier to ovarian cancer. She was like a massive support system. Uh, and I just didn't see like a way out for myself. I didn't see a way forward or a future. Um, and I had friends that I could call, and I just saw them, and I was like, "Oh well, they just had a kid. They're dealing with this and that. They don't want to deal with me. They have all this other burden that they need to deal with. I don't want to add to that. And that thinking really put me into a worse mind state. One of the things that helped me kind of get through it, because it wasn't my first rodeo with negative self-ending thoughts. One of the things that helped me was talking back to that voice in my head like it was a person, and saying like, no, screw you, I'm worth something, I'm gonna find my way out of this, and almost saying it out loud. And I would say it out loud, like I would almost like look in the mirror and be like, no, you're wrong. Like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to find my way out of this. I'm going to get into a good place. It helped to almost manifest it, you know? And you may not believe it when you say it in the moment, but as time goes on, as you repeat that and you say that and you engage with it, like feel negative for those 5 minutes, like you were saying yourself, Dennis, like engage with it, feel as negative as possible, and then tell yourself, like, okay, I'm done. I'm gonna figure out where I'm gonna go from here. You know, that helped me, you know, in a big way. And then I eventually did reach out to my friends and my family, and I told them what I was going through, and it was just baby steps to get there. And when you guys see me on the live streams and I'm laughing and giggling or passing out in the chair, you know, you may not see that was just a few years ago. You know what I mean? That was 2017, 2018 for me, you know? So like not that long. And uh now I'm here. Now I'm doing this. Now we're having these conversations. So like there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You just have to know that it'll be there, you know.
Yep.
So, anyways, I just wanted to throw that out there for everybody.
Yeah, man. No,
Yeah.
I can tell you, I just closed my business, and I've been kind of running my own deal for like 5 or 6 years, and I thought it was gonna feel a lot heavier on me, but it's actually been, you know, very like, oh, just lifted it off. But part of that's because I've got a plan going forward,
Yes.
and decided to go back to school. And, you know, one of the things that I've realized that helps with, making sure that you continue going in that positive direction, or at least for me, is surrounding yourself with a support system. Because
Yep.
one of
Yeah.
the greatest things that helped me out, that I went out and sought after I, was instructed and taught by a counselor, how to be a better person, when you surround yourself with a support system like that, once you find it and you take advantage of it, it's hard to BS yourself back into some dark places. I mean, you're held
Right.
accountable by people who you realize are your friends, who truly have your best interest at heart.
Mm-hmm.
Maddie, I saw you one time pop up in the Discord and was checking in on somebody who was looking like they were buying a knife, and they had said that they couldn't buy no knives because they was in a spot. But you was checking in on homeboy, and making sure that he was kind of holding himself accountable, even if it took
Yep.
you to help him out. And we were just doing a little swappy swap. There was no money being exchanged or anything, but it was awesome because he saw it. I'm trying to remember who it was. It might have been Terry. But he saw it too, and he was just kind of like, by the time that little transaction took place, everybody was in a little bit better place. Wasn't a lot, but it was a little bit. But everybody
Mm-hmm.
was kind of like, haha, cool, cool. Yeah, we see you, Maddie. We see you. Right on, brother.
Just making
And
sure
that's what it's all
everyone,
about.
you know,
And
Maddie's
now
good
you've
like
got and
that,
now you've
man.
got that, Sharif. I mean, I'm amazed sometimes when I first started seeing you pop up. You see the numbers pop up, for said faction and Maddie, and
Mm-hmm.
and then other places where you pop up, and it's like, you know, after being in a low, getting back to where you're up there in some of those higher peaks, and even though you'll still have a
Yeah,
valley
dude.
every now and then, you know, that makes one feel good to see everybody, get
Oh,
what they have coming.
dude, I give all credit to Stevie and Maddie, and I tell them this privately all the time. Like, I was in this community for years, kind of as like a lone lurker, behind the scenes kind of guy. It's this dude here. Hold on, let
no,
me right there.
it's this.
This dude, no, this dude and Stevie. I tell them all the time. They gave me a home. They
Well, I'll
really
tell you the
did.
one that was funny is I kind of think the first time I heard about you was Stella was fangirling on you, man. She was fanboying on you big time. I
Yeah,
mean,
I love Stella, man. She's the best, dude.
How
I
could
can't
you
wait
not
to
love
give her,
Stella?
dude. I'm gonna give her the biggest hug when I see her at Blade Show, man. She's gonna get it literally. Like I'm a big dude, so she's gonna get a full on grizzly bear hug.
That's the thing. A lot of these people, they're gonna need a hug when you see them.
Yep,
Oh yeah,
So you
For
better
sure.
be
yeah.
ready.
for sure.
Dude.
I thought it
Apparently,
was kind of
Dopey
funny
wants to touch my
hearing
butt.
about Shane was talking about he went up and hugged what is it Neve's wife?
Oh, Kara.
Kara?
He went
Yeah.
up and hugged her around the neck, and she had no idea who he was. He was sharing that, and I was like, "Yeah, I bet Shane came up and grabbed your wife around the neck and started putting a big old squeeze on her, and you had no clue. That'd probably be pretty damn alarming, wouldn't it?"
Yes.
I'd like to hear her version of how that went down.
This giant guy with the shaved head came up. Oh, Shane.
Well, Sharif, you want to close us?
Yeah, man. Dude, Dennis, thank you really endlessly for sharing your stories. I really hope that at least one person heard the messages, tonight and really realized the value of what you had to share, because I found it immensely valuable myself, and I know Maddie did too,
Especially
so
that ripple effect part. One
yes.
person performed an action, but it was felt throughout, even with Dennis across the country,
Yeah.
northerly for him, but still it's one quick action affects people forever.
Absolutely.
So,
man.
I mean, Dennis had a lot to say. Very,
Yes, he did.
very he's been through it. And it sounds like he's
Absolutely.
a much better person for it. And someone was looking out for you, Dennis.
I believe so.
So
Yeah,
believe
clearly.
I have no doubt.
But man, thank you for also having the courage to share with us.
Yes, it's
It's
a
not
heavy topic.
easy. Yeah, it's not easy reliving some of these memories and kind of dredging them up to share with other people. So we thank you for doing that again. Also, like it takes some courage to get up and share that stuff. So thank you for being here, man. Really, we truly appreciate it.
Yeah.
And
You're welcome.
on
Thank
that
you
note,
for putting this platform out there. Appreciate it very much.
Yeah, we want people to have a place to talk about this stuff. That for too long we've all been told, shh, keep it to yourself.
mhm.
And I realized, especially through messages since starting this, that people want to talk about it. They have a lot to say, and people have a lot to hear. I think it's good that people like you come on here, share your story, and I know a lot of people can relate.
Even like your shirt, you good, bruh?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
that kind of stuff right there. I mean, I'll wear that hat. I'll wear that hat. I like my hats. Yeah.
This is Papa Rhino made this, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna wear it every Monday. This is my Monday shirt.
Hell
But that's
yeah.
how we normalize it. Is just little things like that.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So,
Well, thank you again, Dennis, for being here. Thank you, Maddie, for the amazing platform and opportunity for everybody to kind of share their mental health journeys. Thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget, if you're new here, please subscribe, like the video, and make sure you join us in the comments. And a reminder again, we are not medical or mental health professionals. We are just trying to share some stories and hopefully heal some people. If you need help, please don't forget, dial 988 or seek medical help. Please be well. Remember, we all love you.
and check in on each other. Check in on your
Yes.
friends, your family, acquaintances. Just check in on somebody.